Welcome back to AM Northwest. You know, Gen Z is getting a bad rap in the workplace. In fact, some companies have gone so far as to create etiquette boot camps for those employees. Here to share why that's only treating the symptoms of a deeper issue, we welcome back strategic advisor and executive coach, Dr. Carol Parker Walsh. How you doing this morning?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. So first of all, these etiquette boot camps, why were they brought in the first place?
Well, part of the problem has been that and we first saw this in the Bay Area. A lot of companies in Silicon Valley and in the Bay Area were bringing in etiquette coaches because their Gen Z employees were treating the workplace like their home.
Yeah.
They were leaving wrappers on the floor because they just knew the janitor would get it, or they weren't taking showers as often as they should, or they were FaceTiming and DMing while in a staff meeting, or just other behaviors that are very typical if you were working at home or living at home. They were just bringing it into the workplace without making an adjustment to how they need to show up for work, how they need to relate, how they need to make eye contact and make connections. And it starts with, in fact, there was a survey that talked about 12% of them brought their parents to their job interviews. So it starts at the job interview, and it was going all the way into the workplace.
Oh,
and the managers felt like they didn't want to parent them, so they figured, let's bring in someone to help them understand how to show up professionally in the workplace.
But you don't think it's a good idea. You think we need to do something a little different.
Yeah, I think we should do something a little bit different. I think it treats the symptom. I think by, instead of the manager parenting, you bringing in a coach to kind of parent, as opposed to trying to really create a workplace culture that allows them to participate in understanding and developing the culture in which they want to be a part of. Because you may be able to course correct a few things, but you also want them to be active participants in the workplace and to feel that they can, that they feel they're valued, that they can offer something important, that they're not set apart as the problem, but that it's an overall workplace cultural thing that we want to really make better for everyone. And I think by separating them out, it could cause more more problem than good.
I see. Okay, so you say to co-create modern manners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to have these kind of conversations about what it looks like at the workplace, there should be not just something directed toward them. It should be a cross-conversational communication. And so if you're going to do that, then I think one of the articles suggested creating a playbook, like the employer creates something and give it to the Gen Z. But I think it should be co-created, like bring the Gen Z, the boomers, and everyone together and have them co-create what does it mean to have workplace norms, and how do we communicate with each other, and how do we want to build a culture where everyone feels valued and appreciated, and that everyone feels comfortable and safe within the workplace. And so don't just create something and then give it to them and expecting them to follow it, because again, that still feels like parenting them. You want to invite them into the conversation so that their ideas, their contributions can be taken in consideration, as well as everyone else. So co-create it. If you want to create a social playbook or something around workplace manners or etiquette, then do it together so that they're a part of the conversation.
Okay, this is going to be an odd question, but you just mentioned how some of them weren't taking showers. They weren't. So are you going to have a general meeting where everyone is told, okay, now everybody take a shower?
Well,
really? Everybody pick up your wrappers off the floor.
I think, well, it's just a general conversation, right? You just say, here's how we want to have the culture of the office in the workplace, right? We don't want to just throw things around. We want to respect everyone that works here, for example, so including the janitorial staff. So we don't need to throw things on the floor expecting them to pick it up behind us. Let's just make sure that we're aiming for the garbage, right? And so, yes, you can point that out to the individuals. I think those are some conversations, but there's also some cultural issues around people, like with showers and hygiene and perfume and things of that nature, that I think is just worth having a conversation where everyone is on the same page.
Okay,
I know for older people are like, of course you take a shower before you go to work, of course you change your clothes, but it still needs to be a collective conversation about what does it mean to show up here in this workplace? How do we want to look? How do we want to show up? How do we want to be so that we're respecting everyone in the workplace?
Yeah, because I know you talked too, I know I've read some stories about how Gen Z dressing very differently, like wildly inappropriate.
Yes, yes. It's an interesting term that they use for it as well. And it's very provocative in
Yeah.
terms of how they dress. It's this idea that you can dress provocatively and still come to work. And there's a lot of TikToks about how to show up in this particular style of dress. And so again, having the conversation on what's appropriate at work.
Yeah.
How do how do you show up in a way that is going to be presentable? And what's our workplace uniform, right?
Yeah.
What's our workplace style in which in terms of how we show up? It's just important to have the conversations. I mean, I know for many people it feels like, why do we have to have the conversation?
Yeah.
But in this generation, it's really important that they have the conversation and that they're being given clear guidelines so that managers aren't wringing their hands or they're frustrated or they don't want to bring them in or they're targeting them as problematic, because then it just sets up a them against us kind of environment in the workplace.
Sure.
So you want to just have a conversation about what's appropriate for the workplace.
Yeah.
Again, it's not something, but a lot of them are getting this idea of dress from watching old 90s movies or things of that nature in terms of how, women showed up or people showed up at work in terms of how they dress. So they're recreating this, thinking it's kind of fun and interesting and different, but it should be clear about what's appropriate in the workplace and having that conversation and including them in that as well. So that they understand they're not being scolded, but they understand that this is a workplace culture that we want to create. And for you to be a part of it and to be effective, we want to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
You got it. Dr. Carol Parker Walsh, always a great conversation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.